Pashyame partha rupani shatashota sahasrasaha nana vidhani divyani nana varuna kritini cha. Krishna in the 11th chapter declares, He Partha, nana varunani divyani nana varuna kritini cha. Pashyame partha, partha, behold my Aishwaram Rupam, my universal form, part of which I am going to reveal multiple forms of mine. Krishna was talking in the context of revealing his Vyuha forms, which are multicolored. Bhagavan assumes Vyuha forms, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Sankarshana forms. These Vyuha forms, through these Vyuha forms, he assumes several hues, several colors. Depending on the yuga, the forms change and the colors of the forms change. Nana vidhani divyani, nana varuna kritini cha. So this declaration of Krishna is very popular. And those of us who have been chanting the Gita, especially the 11th chapter of the Gita, the moment we say colors of Krishna in the Gita, this shloka has to come to our mind. But that is not what we are going to discuss today. Many of you possibly have been wondering if you have seen the topic, colors of Krishna in the Gita. We are celebrating Gokulashtami today in our satsang. And I thought it is only appropriate to revisit Gita after a while and to relish Gita Amrita. What other better way to relish Gita than relishing colors of Krishna in the Gita? So what do we mean? What are the colors of Krishna in the Gita? Now, Gita teaches us one fundamental truth. Bhakti is means to mukti, and the blissful state of mukti is defined by bhakti. And the heart of bhakti is in knowing Krishna's position and also his disposition. The heart of bhakti is in knowing Krishna's position and, more importantly, his disposition. Now, what are Krishna's position and disposition? And how can our bhakti blossom when we know both his position and his disposition? Bhagavan is supremely great. His position is unquestioned. He is Sarvaloka Maheshwara. He is the Purushottama. He is the Sarvaseshi. He is the Sarvashaktiman, Sarvadhara, Sarvaniyanta. His Paratva remains unchanged. Knowing his position evokes awe in us. The more we know Krishna's supreme, exalted position, we get into a state of awe, a state of wonder. But awe and wonder alone are not enough for bhakti to blossom and grow. Bhagavan is not some supreme energy, is not some principle to be analyzed and understood. He is a supremely loving person, one who reciprocates, one who loves us more than we could ever love him. Therefore, we also need to understand his disposition. that supreme person, the Sarvaloka Maheshwara, he is also our well-wisher. When we understand his disposition, which is that he is always looking out to uplift us, elevate us, he is always trying to reach us and always trying to heal us, kindle that sense of bhakti in us. When we know his disposition, we are not only in a state of awe, we also start to fall in love with him. When we understand his unconditional love for us, there is no other way. We just simply start falling in love, or rather rising in love with Krishna. No, it is a fact that Bhagavan strives harder to win our trust than we strive to cultivate our faith in him. He is always trying hard. He is always working to win our trust. And this is evident in the Gita. We see in the Gita how Krishna tries to reach out to Arjuna, to win over Arjuna's heart and mind, heal Arjuna's wounds, kindle bhakti in the heart of Arjuna, and eventually transform him. In the Gita, Krishna's position remains unchanged. His position never changes. He is the Sarvaloka Maheshwara all the time. But his disposition keeps changing all the time because he is constantly reciprocating with us. He is constantly reciprocating with Arjuna. Krishna's bhava in the Gita keeps changing all the time. Bhava is color. Gita is not a monochrome note. It is a rainbow. It is a rainbow of truths that are shared by Krishna in a way that he can win over Arjuna's heart and mind. The light of truth is only one. But when it is directed towards Arjuna, it shines with multiple hues, red with intensity, blue with calmness, golden with compassion. And it shines with splendor and majesty. So therefore we see Krishna's varied hues of Krishna's bhava, his disposition, his emotion in his communication with Arjuna. The supremely powerful text for the art and science of communication is the Gita. Because communication is not about a monotonous lecture. It is about a colorful exchange of ideas. And this is what we see in the Gita. In the samvada between Arjuna and Krishna, we see throughout the Gita how Krishna changes his disposition. His disposition bends with his madhurya. Because he is so sweet that he is ready to change his tone, his mood, so that he can transform Arjuna. Even his terrifying revelation in the Gita, in the Vishwarupa Sandarshana Yoga, is just a refraction of his madhurya. So therefore, when we say colors of Krishna in the Gita, we are here, assembled here today, to relish the various colors of his disposition, the colors of Krishna's bhava in the Gita, in his samvada with Arjuna. Krishna begins his conversation in a very profound manner. He begins with silence. Now we see throughout the first chapter of the Gita, Krishna hardly speaks. The only statement, he makes only one statement. He is silent throughout. He lets Arjuna speak, pour his heart out. Bhishmadrona pramukataha sarvesham cha mahikshitam uvacha partha pashyaitan samavetan kuruniti. Uvacha partha pashyaitan samavetan kuruniti. This is the only word. Hey Partha, pashyaitan, pashya, etan, samavetan kuruniti. This is the only statement that Krishna makes throughout the first chapter of the Gita. We see Krishna's bhava here, protsahana, encouragement. True encouragement is to let Arjuna see before he can act. What is pashya here? When Krishna says, hey Arjuna, pashya, etan samavetan kuruniti. Now, when Arjuna requested Krishna to take him to the center of the battlefield, he could have taken anywhere. But we know where exactly Krishna took Arjuna. Senayor ubhayor madhye sthapayitva ratottamam bhishmadroda pramukataha sarvesham cha mahikshitam. Krishna wanted Arjuna to see not just Kurukshetra, to see Kurukshetra as Dharma Kshetra. Krishna wanted Arjuna to see Dharma unfolding right in front of him. Krishna wanted Arjuna to see the convergence of karma and dharma. Krishna wanted Arjuna to see the field of action where he can see the culmination of causes and effects coming together. Krishna wanted Arjuna to see not just bodily relationships, but to see beyond. To see the Dharma Kshetra, not just the Kurukshetra. So therefore, the very first statement that Krishna makes, we see Krishna's bhava of encouragement, protsahana. Because it is very important for Arjuna to see reality before he can even start acting. Now, this bhava of Krishna is so very important. No, whenever Krishna has already decided that he is going to engage in a very deep conversation, a conversation where he is going to impart profound philosophical truths, and the very first thing that is needed is encouragement for the listener. The listener has to be encouraged, and we learn from Krishna how to begin any samvada on the right note of giving ample, adequate encouragement for Arjuna to see reality. This is a call, clarion call for Arjuna. It's a different story that Arjuna, instead of seeing Dharma Kshetra, Arjuna only saw Kurukshetra. Samavetan Kuruniti. All by referring to the Kurus, Krishna was also testing Arjuna. Is he going to yield to his own attachments, to his own relatives? Because ultimately, Arjuna is also a Kuru. It's not just the Kauravas who are Kurus, even the Pandavas come from the same lineage. And Arjuna yielded to his own attachment, his own confusion, his own fears. And therefore, as the conversation progressed into the second chapter, Krishna's bhava also changes. Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupastitam anarja jushtamaspargyam akirtikaram arjuna. Klaibhyam mas magama partha naitatvai upapadyate kshudram hridaya daurbalyam tyaktodishta paranthapa. Now the bhava is stern warning, it's reprimanding, chastisement. Very harsh, very interesting way Krishna deals with Arjuna. Now this again a lesson we need to learn in the art of communication. Arjuna is in a state of emergency. He is in a state of deep and dark slumber of delusion, confusion. And he has to be jolted. He has to be brought back to reality. And therefore, Arjuna had to be chastised, reprimanded. He had to be admonished. It was a jolt given to Arjuna, like a shock, so that he can bounce back and get into a mode of listening. Arjuna was going full speed in the wrong direction. Now, by talking to him, he is not going to listen. He had to be stopped, and his momentum has to be halted. And therefore, Krishna looks at Arjuna and says, Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupastitam. Vishame is the important word to be stressed here. Hey Arjuna, you are arguing about what is right and what is wrong. It is not the time to discuss what is right and what is wrong. It is time to discuss whether it is the right time to discuss what you are asking me. Arjuna wanted to know what is right or wrong. Krishna talks something else. Krishna talks about right timing and wrong timing. What a way to change Arjuna's direction. Before the war, if you would have asked me this question, it could have been a different conversation altogether, hey Arjuna. But now, right now, on this battlefield, at this point in time, the question that you are asking me is a wrong question. Vishame samupas anarya jushtamasvargyam akirtikaram Arjuna. Hey Arjuna, you are setting yourself to fall into the abyss of infamy. Klaibhyamma smagamapartha naitatvai upapadyate. He uses said kshudram hridaya dorbalyam. Why are you yielding to this unmanliness? Hey Arjuna, this is not what you are. And by using those strong words, Arjuna's attention, his ego is busted then and there. So we see Krishna's bhava as nigraha. From protsahana, his bhava now is a nigraha bhava. In a way, nigraha is essentially a kind of a punishment, reprimand. A very, very strong way of arresting Arjuna's downfall. Now, having arrested Arjuna's journey in the wrong direction, Krishna's bhava slowly shifts. From nigraha bhava, we see his bhava shifting to anugraha bhava. Nigraha changes to anugraha. Natvevaham chatunasam natvam neme janadipaha nachaiva nabhavishyamaha sarve vayamatah param dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tata dehantara praptihi dhiraha tatrana muhyati. The very first profound declaration of Krishna in the Gita, he gives the very essence of Tattvatraya, the very essence of reality. Krishna, why we call this bhava as anugraha bhava? His grace is now showering on Arjuna straight away. Shifting from nigraha, he started to shower his grace by imparting profound truths straight away to Arjuna. Krishna first points out to Arjuna, hey Arjuna, look around. See the same essence in you and in everyone else around you. He points to all the jivatmas all around. Then he points to himself, the Paramatma. No, the Upanishad declares, Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman. He straight away, Natvevaham chatunasam natvam neme janadipaha. Hey Arjuna, you and I and everybody around are all eternal. He points out to the unchanging eternal essence. Because Arjuna's concern, his confusion was about death, destruction, and decay. Now, Krishna says, You are eternal. I am eternal. Everyone around, everyone is eternal. He changes Arjuna's perspective altogether. He points out to all the jivas, he points out to himself, the Paramatma, and then he shifts to the ever-changing part of the reality, Prakriti. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tata dehantara praptihi dhiraha tatra namuhyati. He points out to what? That which never changes, and he immediately points out to that which is always subject to change. He points out to the Atman in Arjuna, and he points out to Arjuna's Deha. And he says, Dhira, one who realizes these two as distinct and different will not grieve, hey Arjuna. So we see here Krishna's Anugraha Bhava. From Nigraha, he shifts to Anugraha. So in the second chapter, in the Samvada, Krishna begins to impart profound philosophical truths to Arjuna. Arjuna continues to listen, but goes around in circles. He's circling in confusion. He goes around asking the same question in many different forms. He wants only one thing, to get out of the Kurukshetra battlefield. He finds various ways of packaging the same question in different forms. Circling in confusion. His confusion still prevails. Therefore, Krishna now shifts his bhava, assumes Shanti. Most important for any teacher. Patience. And Krishna assumes that vital prerequisite. With Shanti, he starts addressing Arjuna's confusion. Nakarmana manarambham naishkarmyam purushoshtute. Nachakarmana deva siddhim samadhigacchati. Nasa sanyasana deva siddhim samadhigacchati. Niyatam kuru karmatvam karmajjayohya karmanaha. Sharira yatra pichate. He says, hey Arjuna, Sharira yatra pi. Even for carrying out your day-to-day functions, you need the Sharira. And therefore, with the Sharira, you need to act. You cannot avoid Niyatam Kuru Karmatvam. You have to do ordained duties. You cannot escape. And this is where Krishna beautifully reconciles. He reconciles Arjuna's two conflicting questions. Arjuna was confused about karma and akarma. Karma is action. Akarma can mean actionlessness or reaction free. So therefore, nakarmana manarambham naishkarmyam purushoshnute. Hey Arjuna, naishkarmya. First understand what is naishkarmya. Naishkarmya can be just translated as actionlessness, no activity. But that is not the real meaning here, Arjuna. Naishkarmyam is a state where you continue to do your duty, continue to do your actions, but reaction free. No action with no reaction, which means doing actions that do not accrue reactions. Reaction is the karma vasana and karma phala. So naishkarmya is that supreme state of continuing to do one's duty without accruing karma phala, without accruing karma vasana. It is action in a state of no reactions. Reaction means consequences, which are karma phala and karma vasana. So therefore, with the bhava of Shanti, Krishna is addressing Arjuna's confusion. He says, Arjuna, if your question is whether I can avoid doing my duty, avoid actions, you cannot. Nacha sanyasana deva siddhim samadhigacchati. Siddhi here is liberation. Just by renunciation, you cannot attain liberation. Therefore, act you must. You must perform your duty. So through patience, Krishna continues to convince Arjuna. But then Arjuna still needs to be shown that what Krishna says is authentic, authoritative. Therefore, in the midst of discussion on Karma Yoga, from the Kshanti Bhava, Krishna now assumes Aishwarya Bhava. Ajopisan avyayatma bhutanam ishpuropisan prakritiswam adhisthaya sambhavami atmamayaya. Now, in order to give authority to his declarations, when Krishna says, hey Arjuna, you must do your duty, this is what is ordained for you, in order to show that this is backed by authority, in order to convince Arjuna, he assumes now the bhava of Aishwarya. Aishwarya bhava is once again showing his greatness. This is where Krishna in the 4th chapter reveals his avatara rahasya. Ajopisan avyayatma bhutanam ishwaropisan prakritim swamadhishtaya sambhavami atmamayaya. Thanks to B.R. Chopra, the next 2 shlokas are very popular. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata abhyudhanam adharmasya tadatmanam sujanyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkrutam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Now here, before he revealed the secret of his avatars, very clearly says, hey Arjuna, it is Atmamaya, my sankalpa. With my sankalpa, I take Prakritim Swam Adhishtaya, using my Prakriti, my nature, I take several avatars. For what? Here, in the context of discussion on Karma Yoga, Arjuna is being told that in the microcosm there is order, in the macrocosm there is order. Your duty is to perform, your duty is to maintain order in the microcosm. My duty is to maintain order in the macrocosm. When your duty aligns with my duty, then you become successful, hey Arjuna. So by revealing his greatness, his paratva, by revealing the rahasya, avatara rahasya, assuming the bhava of Aishwarya, in the 4th chapter, we see how Arjuna is given the required authenticity to the teachings. Now, again, another hallmark of a true teacher. Krishna is saying, this is not what I am teaching you, Arjuna. This is what all the Shastras have ever been teaching. Again, to give authenticity to his teaching and authority to his teaching, Krishna assumes Aishwarya Bhava. Protsahana Bhava in the 1st chapter. Nigraha, transforming to Anugraha in the 2nd chapter. And then Shanti in the 3rd chapter. And then Aishwarya Bhava in the 4th chapter. Arjuna still has a confusion. Hey Krishna, on the one hand you are talking about sannyasa, on the other hand you are talking about karma yoga, you are talking about performing actions, you are also talking about renunciation. You have been confusing me a lot, Arjuna says. This is what we too keep saying, right? After 18 chapters, we still ask, hey Krishna, why do you confuse us? Now, Arjuna asked this right in the 5th chapter itself. Sanyasaha karma yogascha nishreyasa karau bhau tayostu karma sanyasat karma yogo visishyate. Here, Krishna assumes samya bhava, equipoised clarity, balance. Very, very important to reconcile what two things, when two things seem conflicting in nature. When we look at sannyasa, which is renunciation, and karma yoga, which is full engagement in action, they are seemingly conflicting. On the face of it, obviously action and renunciation are conflicting. But Krishna tries to bring both of them together. He says, hey Arjuna, renunciation is not escape. Action is not bondage. You can always bring them together. You can always bring them together in a beautiful union of internal renunciation and outward engagement. This is where Krishna brings in the principle of karma yoga. What we need to understand here is how Krishna is teaching Arjuna and all of us. How do we continue to engage with the world in order to eventually attain disengagement with the world? This is the beauty of Krishna's teachings. Krishna is not saying, hey Arjuna, disengage, walk away, pack off. He says, continue to engage with the world. It is only through engagement with the world you can eventually achieve disengagement with the world. Now, there is one subtle lesson that Krishna is embedding in this. What is that subtle lesson? When we engage only with the world, we become engaged. When our engagement stops with the world, we become engaged, imprisoned in samsara. What is Krishna asking us to do? Continue to engage with the world, and through the world, engage with the world maker. Then, eventually, through this engagement, disengagement is guaranteed. Now, I'm also speaking like Krishna in the Gita, it looks like. But this may seem difficult, but it's very simple. Eventually, liberation is disengagement with the world, not to be associated ever again. Now, Krishna says, for this, we don't need to stop doing our worldly actions. In our day-to-day life and living, we have to engage with this world. But when we recognize the world maker Krishna through the world, and when we engage with Krishna, which means we serve and love him through our actions, then that leads to our eventual disengagement. So we are engaging with the world, we are using the material, and we are spiritualizing the material for our liberation. This is the very essence of Karma Yoga. This is where Krishna's Samya Bhava comes in. Equipoised clarity, balance, bringing and balancing act, and clearly telling Arjuna, hey Arjuna, it is not this or that, it is this and that. It is just about, you must recognize what you must renounce. You must not renounce the action, you must renounce the threefold attachment that comes with every action. So therefore, in the 5th chapter, we see Krishna's bhava of Samya. Now, Arjuna is a great listener, and thankfully so. And because Arjuna is a great listener, he also asks several important questions to keep the samvada going. Now, in the process of this conversation, through the right questions of Arjuna, Krishna also says, how do you do this? How do we engage with the world maker through the world to eventually gain disengagement? The sadhana requires managing the mind. Ultimately, any sadhana that we do boils down to one fundamental practice, which is mastering the mind. And when Krishna talks about managing the mind, Arjuna asks a very important question, which all of us keep asking. Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramati balavadridam. Hey Krishna, you just easily said, manage your mind, everything will fall in place. That is exactly my problem. This mind is restless, ruthless, relentless, and it is more difficult than even, it is faster than the wind. How do I manage it? Don't come and give me a statement to say, manage your mind as a solution to all my problems. You have actually made my problem even more difficult to solve. And what is the bhava that is required here? Krishna immediately assumes the bhava of sahanubhuti. Krishna doesn't look at Arjuna and say, what is this nonsense, Arjuna? I've given you such a perfect solution. Are you crazy or what? Krishna doesn't say that. Krishna says, you're right, Arjuna. I understand. It is important to understand before being understood. Fundamental lesson in any effective communication. Krishna demonstrates this. Important to understand. He understands Arjuna, and he knows only when he understands him, he can become understood by Arjuna. Sahanubhuti, today we talk about empathy. Krishna shows that empathy, the bhava of empathy, in samvada with Arjuna. He says, hey Arjuna, asamshayam mahabaho manaha durnigraham chalam. He says, I understand this manas is durnigraha, cannot be conquered easily. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. Therefore, let me give you a step-by-step simple process by which you can slowly, steadily, one step at a time, start to control, manage and master your mind. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. The way you can conquer your mind is through abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa, practice, repeated practice. There is no shortcut here, Arjuna. You have to constantly practice. So whatever techniques that Krishna prescribes in the 5th and the 6th chapter, he says, hey Arjuna, step by step, continue to practice. Be steadfast in your practice and cultivate vairagya, cultivate detachment from everything else, attached to the practice itself. And over a period of time, slowly and steadily, you will conquer your mind. So we see in the 6th chapter, the all-important bhava of sahanubhuti, empathy that Krishna assumes in his conversation with Arjuna. Protsahana, the 1st chapter, Nigraha, transforming into Anugraha in the 2nd chapter, and then in the 3rd chapter, Shanti, patience, then he revealing his greatness through the bhava of Aishwarya, then Samya bhava in the 5th chapter, and then Sahanubhuti in the 6th chapter. The heart of the Gita is the middle hexad of the Gita. This is where the hero introduction happens. Generally in all the Bollywood movies, the first 10-15 minutes hero introduction happens. Imagine hero introduction happening only at the time of interval. It's almost at the time of interval. After 6 chapters, the real hero introduction happens. The 7th chapter to the middle hexad is a glorious hexad. This is where we see Krishna in full bloom of his Seshi bhava. And we also see Gambhirya bhava. We see the depth, when we talk about the greatness of an ocean, how do we measure the depth of an ocean? Here, Krishna reveals his Swaswarupa. And in the process of revealing his Swaswarupa, he assumes Seshi bhava. Very important to know these two words. Sesha, Seshi. Sesha is very familiar to us, Adi Sesha. He is the Adi Sesha. He is the ultimate Sesha, supreme Sesha. Sesha is one who serves the Seshi. The Sesha exists only for the Seshi. The Seshi sustains, supports, controls, lords over the Sesha. And therefore, the Seshi Bhava, Krishna blooms in fullness of Seshi Bhava throughout the chapters of 7 to 12, where he reveals Swaswarupa, his own true nature. But in that process, while the dominant bhava is the Seshi bhava throughout 7th to 12th chapters, we also see shades of other bhavas also being assumed by Krishna. One beautiful bhava that he assumes in the 7th chapter. He looks at Arjuna and he says, Udhara sarva evete jnani tu atmaiva me matam astitassahi yuktanam mamevam anuttamam gatim. Bhagavan's audarya bhava is unimaginable. He says, any bhakta, irrespective of whether he is asking for me alone or asking for anything, as long as he is a bhakta, he is a udara, he says. Udara means one who is magnanimous. Anyone, as long as one has his direction towards Krishna, it is enough, he says. It is okay if he comes and asks, Krishna is patiently waiting for his bhaktas to come and say, hey Krishna, I want nothing else other than you and you alone. But unfortunately, majority of those who come to him ask everything other than him. But Krishna says, Even if all of those are udharas, he says. How magnanimous he should be to consider everybody else who are doing business transactions with him to be magnanimous. Somebody goes to him and says, "Hey Krishna, I will put 10 rupees. You have to assure $10,000. Misproportion. No, nowhere else can one imagine any kind of this transaction. But with Krishna, everything will fly. And he accepts everything. And he says, Udara, how generous he is. Someone comes into the temple chased by a dog and is going apradakshina all around the temple. Bhagavan says, Udara, how lovingly he is going around my temple. He is going anti-clockwise. But it doesn't matter to Bhagavan. Any simple deed done knowingly or unknowingly, Bhagavan starts to praise. It's like a mother looking at her own child. The child is talking gibberish. He goes around the town saying, my son is the best speaker on this planet. Udara. For the mother, the child is Udara. So therefore, Audarya, the bhava of Audarya, when Krishna looks at Arjuna and says in the 7th chapter, he says, Udara sarva evaite. But the most important part of the shloka, Jnani tu atma iva me matam. Everyone is an Udara. All the bhaktas are Udaras. But I consider the Jnani, the supreme bhakta, as my Atma, he says. Bhagavan is the Paramatma. He is the Antaratma of every entity. But he says, when it comes to my bhakta, my supreme bhakta, he is the one who supports me. He is the one who controls me. No wonder he allows himself to be bound to a mortar by Yashoda. The one who is boundless gets bound to a mortar. Why? Because he considers his bhakta as his very Atma. That is the Audarya bhava there. Therefore, Krishna in the 7th chapter assumes Audarya bhava. And then comes the 8th chapter, where Krishna declares to Arjuna, Antakale cha mameva smaran mukta kalevaram yat prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayaha. Arjuna is worried. All of us are also worried. You become what you think at the time of death. Very, very, very terrifying declaration. Krishna also adds, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhyacha mayyarpita mano buddhi mame vaishyasi asamshayaha. The bhava of pratishrava. Pratishrava bhava. Pratishrava bhava is where solemn assurance. Bhagavan gives us that assurance. Hey Arjuna, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhyacha. If you strive to keep remembering me throughout your life, then obviously your Antima Smriti will be my Smriti, and I assure you that you will attain me and me alone. A very, very important assurance in the Gita. The Gita is a book of assurances. This is one very important assurance that Krishna gives. Pratishrava, solemn assurance. Bhagavan not only gives assurance, we need more than assurance, we also need insurance. So therefore in the 9th chapter, Krishna also gives insurance. Abhiraksha. He assumes the bhava of Abhiraksha. The moment Krishna says, all that you need to do is to practice constantly remembering me throughout your life. Then when Antima Smriti, when it comes at the time of death, then you will certainly remember me and you will attain me. So immediately all of us intelligent people ask, if I keep remembering about you all the time throughout my life, who will remember about my needs? Who will take care of my needs? Everything that I require. Krishna has an answer for that also. If you remember me throughout your life, I will take care of what you need throughout your life. Ananyas chintayanto mam yejana paryupasate yesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. Yogakshemam vahamyaham. LIC took this and made their statement. Insurance. All of us need insurance as well as assurance. Bhagavan is giving the insurance along with assurance. Yoga and kshema. If you keep focused on me, I will stay focused on what you need, your yoga, your kshema, your provisions and your preservation of the provisions. Because ultimately what we do in our life, we only do two things in our life. Anything that we do can be categorized into these two categories: acquisition, preservation of what we acquire. These are the only two things we do. There is nothing else we do. Krishna says, both of this, instead of you struggling to acquire, you struggling to protect, delegate that to me, do the easier task of remembering me. So he gives us a simple task and he takes up the challenging task of yoga and kshema. So therefore, abhiraksha, pratishrava, abhiraksha. Pratishrava bhava is solemn assurance. Pratishrava bhava in 8th chapter. Abhiraksha bhava in 9th chapter, which is insurance. Now, Arjuna wants further convincing. Okay, you have said you will take care of my yoga and kshema. Can you really take care of my yoga and kshema? Aham sarvasya prabhavaha mattas sarvam pravartate iti matva vajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. Therefore, in the 10th chapter, he assumes the bhava of swadhinata. He is the sovereign supreme. Swadhinata. He says in the 9th chapter, hey Arjuna, all the resources that you need, I will give you. And then he says, those resources, the source of all those resources, I am the source. I am the source of all resources. I am the source of all sources. Therefore, I am the independent source. Swadhinata. He is the sovereign supreme ruler. He is the only one who is independent. Everything else is dependent on him. Aham sarvasya prabhavaha. Mattas sarvam pravartate. Everything else depends on him, emanates from him. Pravritti and nivritti of everything in this world is dependent on Bhagavan, because he is the source of all sources, cause of all causes. And at the same time, iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. And that sovereign, independent source of all sources is ready to become our beloved. And the moment once we realize this, iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha, bhakti automatically blossoms. Therefore, in the 10th chapter, Krishna assumes the bhava of swadhinata. Arjuna is thrilled when he understands that Bhagavan is the sovereign supreme. Everything belongs to him. And therefore, he now sees how everything in this created world, every entity is Bhagavan's vibhuti. And therefore, now he has a beautiful framework as to how he can stay connected with Krishna. Because anything and everything I deal with is Krishna's vibhuti. And Arjuna therefore wants to see this in action, and it is the outcome of Arjuna's desire to see, experience Krishna's Rupa and Swarupa. In the 11th chapter we see Krishna revealing that glorious Vishwarupa Darshana to Arjuna. The main bhava that we have to see throughout 7th to 12th chapters, we see the Seshi bhava throughout, Gambhirya bhava throughout, but we are seeing specific sub-bhavas in all the other chapters. So in the 11th chapter, we see two very important dominant sub-bhavas. Bhishanam, Kalosmi lokakshayakrit pravruddha, lokan samahattu miha pravruttaha, tite pitvanna bhavishyanti sarve, evastita pratyanikeshu yodha. Krishna, the purpose of Krishna revealing Vishwarupa Darshana to Arjuna is only one purpose: to make Arjuna see that it is only action which is in his hands, the results are in Krishna's hands. It is for Arjuna. Now we see how the Pasya of the first chapter is culminating in the Pasya of the 11th chapter. Pashyetan samavetan kuru niti. Hey Arjuna, Pashya, look at, see, behold the Dharma Kshetra. Now he says, Pashyame Yogamaishwaram. Now, when When you see the Dharma Kshetra, see that action. In the field of action, hey Arjuna, the action alone is in your hands. This is the message of the first chapter, Pashya, message of first Pashya. He is asking Arjuna to see the field of action. When you see the field of action, the Dharma Kshetra, action alone is in your hands. Now the Pashya of the 11th chapter, results are in my hands, hey Arjuna. That's the difference between the two Pashyas. The first Pashya says, action is in your hands, therefore you must act. This Pashya in the 11th chapter says, results are in my hands, therefore don't worry about them. And therefore, he assumes the bhava of Bhishana, terrifying, fierce form. Arjuna is terrified, but then immediately the Bhishana bhava transforms into bhava of Bhadram. Sudurdarshamidam rupam drishtavanasi yanmama devapyasya rupasya nityam darshanakankshaha. Krishna reveals that glorious form to Arjuna, the original Narayana form, and he says, Sudurdarshamidam rupam, the auspicious Divyamangala Vigraha, that is not easily available, accessible even to the Devas. He says, Arjuna, this form is not easy to behold. And that auspicious form is revealed to Arjuna. There we see Krishna assuming the bhava of Bhadram. So, two dominant bhavas that we see throughout the 11th chapter. One is Bhishanam, the other is Bhadram. Now comes the 12th chapter. Here Krishna reveals a very, very interesting and fascinating bhava. The bhava of Trishna. What is Trishna? Longing. We all think we are striving to long, to belong to Krishna, without realizing that Krishna longs for our union more than we can ever long for his union. This is where we see Bhagavan's Bhakta Trishna. Now, all the Bhaktas try to cultivate Krishna Trishna, but we also realize and we find out, we discover that Bhagavan's Trishna, his craving to possess us, is even more greater. Deshamaham samuddarta mrityu samsara sagarat bhavami nachirat partha maya veshita chetasam. Krishna makes a solemn assurance to Arjuna. He looks at Arjuna and says, Arjuna, you think you are striving to attain me, but remember, I'm just waiting for that moment when you are ready. Nayami paramam sthanam marchiradi gatim vina garudaskandamaropya yatecham anivaritaha. When the bhakta is ready for mukti, Bhagavan comes rushing all the way. Garudaskandamaropya, mounting on Garuda, he comes all the way to accompany the Muktatma all the way back to Vaikuntha. This shows Krishna's Bhakta Trishna. He longs for our union. He loves us more than we could ever imagine. And therefore, in the 12th chapter, Krishna, in the context of his exposition on Bhakti Yoga, he shows his bhava of Bhakta Trishna. Deshamaham samudharta mrityu samsara sagarat. Bhavami nachirat partha. You do not need to wait. When the time arrives, when you are ready, immediately it is my responsibility to empower you, cross over the ocean of samsara, hey Arjuna, he says. Thus we see through the middle hexad of the Gita, varying bhavas as sub-bhavas to the dominant bhava of Krishna's Seshi bhava and Gambhirya. The way Gita is structured is so very scientific, systematic, and very logical. With 12 chapters of the Gita, Krishna's exposition gets over. Gita is completed with 11th chapter itself, and in the 12th chapter, he makes the conclusion on Bhakti. Now then we have 6 more chapters. Why 6 more chapters are needed is a question that many may ask. The third hexad of the Gita, chapters 13 to 18, in many ways are Krishna, basically a revisit done by Krishna to every topic that was covered in the first 12 chapters. We can look at Krishna's bhava here between chapters 13 and 17 as Vishechana. Vishechana bhava. Vishechana is analytical, analysis, dissection. Essentially, we see in the 13th chapter, he basically contrasts the kshetra from the kshetrajna. In the 14th chapter, he contrasts all the three gunas. In the 15th chapter, he contrasts the Baddha Jiva from the Mukta Jiva, from the Mukta Jiva, from the Nitya Jiva. Eventually, he shows who is the Purushottama. In the 16th chapter, he talks about the two categories of Daivi Sampad, Asuri Sampad. In the 17th chapter, he analyzes Shraddha, he analyzes Tapas, Yajna, Dana. So we see throughout 13 to 16 chapter, we see a detailed analysis, an analytical framework that he gives, which is a bhava of Vishechana. In many ways, we can look at chapters 1 to 12 as Krishna's Upadesha, chapters 13 to 17 as Krishna's Vishechana. And what is chapter 18? Siddhanta, which is the conclusion of all conclusions. So in this, between 13 to 17, we see Krishna going through in a very scientific manner, in a very, very analytical way. He gives the details on all the three tattvas, the tattvas of Chit, sentient beings, Achit, insentient Prakriti, and Ishvara, Bhagavan Krishna himself. Then comes the 18th chapter, the conclusion of all conclusions. It is in the 18th chapter that we see the crux, the fundamental bhava of Krishna, the bhava that underlies every other bhava. And what is that bhava that we see in the 18th chapter? It is Sharanagata Vatsalya bhava. It is this bhava which is the fundamental, because everything that Krishna did throughout the Gita is an expression of this bhava. Every other bhava, because ultimately he is Sharanagata Vatsala. And in 18th chapter, Krishna assumes that love, because when we say 18th chapter is a conclusion, the last word of Krishna is not a law. The last word of Krishna is love. And that's what we see in the 18th chapter, where Krishna, by assuming the bhava of Sharanagata Vatsala, gives us the most important assurance, the assurance of all assurances. The assurance is that we always have this question: do we need to become perfect to get his shelter? Because Krishna, we realize, is the shelter of all shelters. Krishna clearly says, perfection is not a prerequisite for his shelter. Rather, he perfects those who takes his shelter. This is a very, very reassuring message that Krishna gives in the 18th chapter. This is Bhakta Sharanagata Vatsalya. Also, we get an answer to a most important question, that a question that plagues us all the time. When we are on this path, we keep asking this question: are we good enough for God? Because we know the moment we do self-reflection, we are scared. The Shastras keep asking us do self-reflection, but we don't bring ourselves to do self-reflection, because when we start doing self-reflection, we are in a very, very uncomfortable position, because we know, after all, we are all bundles of aparadhas. We are all bundles of apacharas. And therefore, many times we don't bring ourselves to do any self-reflection. And this question that plagues us all the time: am I good enough? Am I good enough for God? The resounding answer should be, we are not good enough for God. And yet, we are always good enough for God. There are two parts to the statement. We are not good enough for God, and yet we are always good enough for God. When I say we are not good enough for God, it's very obvious. we can never become pure. We can never become perfect. We can never gain all the qualifications that are required to attain Him. Impossible. Therefore, we can never be good enough for God. And yet, we are always good enough for God because Krishna is not bothered. He does not care for our qualifications as much as He cares for us. He does not look at our qualifications. He only looks at what is there in our heart. And as He cares, He is our well-wisher. He is our suhrut. He is constantly looking at us only to see if our heart gets slightly directed towards Him. That's all He is waiting for. Therefore, we can say with all assurance that we are always good enough for Krishna. And when Krishna says, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja, aham tva sarva papebhyaha. Krishna, this is where Krishna's Vatsalya is coming into play. Krishna, just like how a mother cow becomes ready to clean the filth, the dirt, the blood, everything that is obnoxious of her own calf when she gives birth. The mother cow cleans with her own tongue. Bhagavan is like that mother cow. His Vatsalya is unimaginable. And when he says, Aham tva sarva papebhyaha mokshayishyami, what more assurance that we need? His Vatsalya bhava is what constantly and continuously gives us the required strength all the time. And it is this Vatsalya bhava that is the very bedrock of all his bhava. When we say Krishna he reciprocates with us, we must recognize this Vatsalya bhava, that he is not looking at my qualification, he is just looking at my heart. And even if I can show a small iota of love for him in my heart, he accepts me fully. And this is the biggest assurance that Krishna gives in the Gita. And if we need to take one bhava out of all the bhavas across all the 18 chapters, this is that one bhava, Krishna's Sharanagata Vatsalya. Therefore, when we relish the colors of Gita and the Krishna, we see how Krishna goes to any length to make himself colorful. After all, we fancy colors, isn't it? And Bhagavan therefore assumes different colors. His disposition keeps changing depending on us. All of us are very different. And Krishna changes his disposition according to our needs. He is possibly the only one who is constantly changing himself for our sake. And while his position remains constant all the time, and when we recognize this, when we know his position, he is Sarvaloka Maheshwara. He is the Akila Karana, Jagat Karana, Nishkarana. He is the Sakaladhara, Sarva Seshi, Sarva Niyanta. And he is the Purushottama, and yet he is ready to go to any length for my sake. He is ready to change his dispositions, to come to make himself accessible to me on my terms, not on his terms. When we realize this, his position and his disposition, and when we realize that Krishna, with the dark-hued Krishna, is also multicolored for our sake. And when we see all these colors, then we have no other option. Then we realize we have only one business in this life. The only business that we have is to love him and serve him. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.